Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, this July is on track to be the hottest month ever recorded. We're asking you, how has your life changed amid these increasingly hotter summers? And how has the heat changed your perspective and your behavior around climate change? And they're sometimes called boomerang kids. Are you a young adult living at home with your parents? Or is your adult child living with you? Is our society still too judgmental about this? That's after 12:30. I'm Michelle Eliot. This is BC Today. Thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1 and watching us live streaming as well on CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC, or on YouTube on the CBC Vancouver page. Well, across the globe, July is set to become the hottest month on record. Scientists confirmed today that the past 3 weeks have been the hottest since records began. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said earlier that the era of global warming has ended, and he said that the era of global boiling has arrived. Well, today we're asking for your thoughts. How has your life changed amid these hotter summers? And how has the heat changed your perspective or your behavior around climate change? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, on your cell phone, star or pound 690. You can also send us an email, bctoday@cbc.ca. Right now, we're joined by Darius Madavi. He's CBC's Science and Climate Specialist here in Vancouver. Darius, good afternoon.
Hello.
What went through your mind when you saw, this is something that you cover, of course, every day. What went through your mind when you saw that these scientists were saying this is on track to become the hottest month ever recorded?
I was upset and not surprised. We did just see the hottest June on record. Last June, NASA confirmed, was the hottest June we've ever seen since records began. And
this is about 100 years ago, right? More than 100 years
More than 100 years ago,
yes.
Yes. I believe since the 1850s. And it looks like we're on track because temperatures have only kept going up. Since, I believe, July 3rd was the first time that we passed the previous record for the highest global air temperature, 2-meter air temperature, and we have not dropped back below the record since. Every single day since earlier this month has been above that previous record set, I believe, in 2021 for the hottest global air temperature. The record still stands from July 6th or 7th, almost half a degree hotter than what the previous record was, but we've just had these record temperatures, so I don't see a way that we don't surpass the previous hottest month on record.
Now, the UN World Meteorological Organization says it's extremely likely, it's waiting for the finalized data on this, but they're also saying that these rising temperatures are mainly caused by human-caused emissions. So can we directly attribute then this increase and these record-breaking increases to climate change?
Yes, and I think we need to separate this into two pieces. There's the piece that we experience with our heat waves that we're experiencing on land. So we've been hearing all month about the heat waves in the southern U.S.,
yes,
in southern Europe, and in China, and actually throughout Asia. And then we've also been hearing about these global temperature records being broken. So when we talk about the global, these are usually measured by satellites that take readings across the entire planet, including over the ocean, where we're seeing extreme heat waves. So El Nino is heating up the Pacific Ocean,
yes,
and then we're having a mostly climate change-driven heat wave in the Atlantic as well. That is well beyond anything that we've seen before. And then with the compounding effects of climate change, that's what's allowing us to break these global temperature records. The heat waves get a little bit trickier because it's hard to attribute any one extreme weather event to climate change. But now, because that's been such an issue, especially with communicating issues around climate change and extreme weather, we have groups that do that work and try and do rapid, what we call attribution analysis. So trying to create direct links between extreme weather events pretty much as they're happening in almost real time and climate change. So earlier this week, World Weather Attribution, which is, I think, probably the leading group doing this, released a report that showed that all three heat waves would have been were way more likely as a result of climate change. The heat wave in China was found to now be a 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 year event, where previously it would have been a 1 in 100 or 1 in 250 year event. And it was around 1 degree Celsius warmer than it should have been if we had a heat wave of that likelihood pre-climate change. For the Europe heat wave and the North America heat wave, those would have been virtually impossible without climate change. If you take a look at the graphs of where we project heat waves to land with and without climate change, they don't, there's no overlap, which means that we wouldn't have seen that heat wave pretty much ever if it wasn't for climate change. So the way that they do these attribution analyses involves a lot of statistics, but just taking a look at the graphs, you can get a really clear picture of sort of where we should be and where we are.
Okay, that's really interesting that this body has organized or come up as a result of wanting to get those answers, and that connection, and whether that they're established that connection and that attribution, as you said, really interesting. Darius Madavi is with me here in our Vancouver studio. He is CBC's climate and science specialist. And we are talking about July being set to become the hottest month on record. This goes back more than 100 years. And we are taking your calls as well, asking you, how has your own life changed amid these hotter summers? How has the heat changed your perspective or your behavior around climate change? Love to hear from you on the open line, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, star or pound 690. And you can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. Wendy writes us, I listened to a talk by Seth Klein last weekend, and he said, polling reveals most Canadians agree climate change needs to be addressed. 50% of Canadians polled did not know that climate change is caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Wendy, thank you very much. It's bctoday@cbc.ca. And before I go to our first caller, Michael Mehta joins us now too. He's an environmental studies professor at Thompson Rivers University, and he joins us from Kamloops. Hi there, Michael. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Thank you very much for joining us. You heard Darius talk about those daily records being broken pretty much every day, right, as the temperatures go up. So does this come as a surprise to you at all?
Well, I had the same reaction Darius did. No, not a surprise. Of course, a little bit of fear going forward with what's coming, especially next year. The El Nino cycle that we've just started is not even picking up yet. It will be over the winter months. So I think next year will be a lot worse at this time of year.
Letting people sit with that news and that analysis, what do you think might be the reaction from the public? What do you think they need to do then?
Well, we're going to get mixed reactions like we've had with climate change in general for decades. We're going to have some people that are going to be very deeply in denial and who will experience a certain amount of cognitive dissonance where the reality of what they're observing is inconsistent or doesn't fit with their belief systems. So that's going to create some tension for them. And for other people, you're going to see a range of responses from maybe a little bit of paralysis and anxiety to something more proactive.
Okay, love to get to the proactive part, but you do a good job there of just giving us the range of how people might react to this news, this hearing that this July is set to be the hottest on record. As you're saying, we expect things will only get worse for next year. We're asking for your reaction to that, and as you have experienced hotter summers in BC as well, certainly we remember the heat dome of 2021. How has that changed your life? And how has your own perspective, your own behaviors, how have they changed as a result of these increasingly hot summers? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, star or pound 690. Anton is joining us from Bowen Island. Hi, Anton. Welcome back.
Thank you, Michelle. How are you?
I am doing okay. What are your thoughts today? What's your reaction?
Well, it's not a surprise if we look at our own province, what the provincial government is doing when it comes down to moving away from oil and gas. it's heavily investing, or it's letting companies heavily investing in LNG. And that's really problematic, because the plan is now to bring down emissions from those plants, but to use BC hydroelectricity for that, which is basically insanity. We're putting so-called clean energy into projects that will emit a lot in Asia through the fuel being exported. And I've been working on trying to stop the wood-fired LNG project for years. We were successful in getting the seawater cooling system cancelled, but the project shouldn't go ahead, because for that reason we are in a dire situation, and we have to cut back as soon as we can.
Yeah.
The Pembina Institute has recently published a Squaring the Circle, Reconciling Energy Expansion with BC Climate Goals, and it's a good report, and it shows that there is now a real plan from the BC government to meet the targets 2030 and 2050 with the expansion of LNG.
And so, Anton, you talk about why do we need these projects? At the same time as heat increases, we have seen and heard about the need then for people to survive the heat, then using either air conditioning or heat pumps if they can. How do we do that? It's that sort of short-term survival, and keeping in mind the long term, because of course using air conditioners, using energy affects climate change.
Yeah, we painted ourselves into a corner. We should have started this 30 years ago. Of course, we cannot go back in time, but now we're paying the price for that. And I think it's basically, as Seth Klein said in his book, we have to see it as a war economy and move as fast as we possibly can, and put all the priority into moving away from oil and gas, and making sure that with electrifying our societies, that we make that electricity available, but also make sure that we still become more energy efficiency as well, because there's a lot in that area as well.
Anton, thank you so much for the call. You take care over in Bowen Island.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Take care. Bye-bye.
I can see Michael Mehta nodding as he's listening to Anton. I'll just go back to you, and I know I can see people watching us on the live stream can see that you have a special guest with you. Some listeners may have heard as well. You have your pet parrot there with you.
I do. This is Kendra, the Senegal parrot. If I don't have her on me, she will squeal, as you can hear.
She's beautiful. Welcome to the show, Kendra. So you were nodding there. He talked about we need to go into a war economy, is what he said, right? Things need to move fast. Is the federal government, is the provincial government here in BC moving fast enough?
Well, in the wrong direction. I have to agree with a lot of what Anton said. The push for LNG, as well as hydrogen, which is also coming, and nuclear, are all being pushed by the same set of actors. Those that are really heavily involved in oil and gas, they all benefit from those kinds of energy sources. And at the same time, what we see is a really strong sort of public push against the alternatives. If you just look at social media, you'll see that there's a tremendous amount of disinformation about electric vehicles, about heat pumps, about solar.
What do you mean by that?
Your diet, all those things.
What do you mean by disinformation around heat pumps and electric vehicles?
Well, there's a lot of competing views out there that are simply not based in reality. There's a lot of people that are just continuing to push that sort of echo chamber in that direction. I see it all the time. Whenever I post anything about these technologies, there's an instant backlash. And it's generally speaking the same kind of men that do this, unfortunately, I have to say.
And so just to get some clarity from you on that, are you saying they are critical of these technologies, or they say they don't go far enough? What is it exactly?
They're critical, and it's a coordinated attack. It's quite clear to me that this has been something that's been planned for a long time to keep people guessing and questioning whether or not these transition technologies are something to embrace.
Okay. Are some of the criticisms not legitimate, though, when you say, electric vehicles, for example, concerns around mining of those materials and that kind of thing?
They're not. Most of them are based on very small threads of the truth. And Some of them are grossly exaggerated. For example, I hear people say that if we move to electric vehicles and electric heating and air conditioning, like heat pumps, will break the grid. Far from it. An EV uses about as much electricity as a dryer does annually. So, it's this kind of information that is really pernicious.
Okay. What does that tell you, Darius? I'll just go back to you on that. What does that tell you about where we are at in that debate and that discussion around solutions to climate change?
It makes it difficult because we want to talk as much as we can about solutions and what we're moving towards, what scientists are looking into to try and solve a lot of these problems that we have. But is often a coordinated effort on the other side to avoid having those discussions. And when we're researching new solutions, there is always some uncertainty. But I think making a leap to something like saying that the grid would be overloaded is not often backed up by data. And they are often claims that are made because it sounds like something that might be reasonable. But I think when you dig down into the data, it doesn't often pan out that way.
That must become a much bigger part of your job then, that communication. Whereas I would imagine a while back, perhaps you're looking at weather forecasting, but now it's it's a much broader spectrum that you think about, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. My background is primarily in climate work, which is great because I know a lot of, especially if you go into fields like ecology, most of the discussion is around climate change. Like most scientific, I think every discipline has at least some association with climate change. And so it is becoming a big part of really any scientific field that you go into, which is really important because it means that I have a great basis in sort of these kinds of issues. And yet even I sometimes find myself falling into one of these arguments like, oh, it might be too much for the grid. Oh, that's something we should look into. Like, is my thought process, oh, we would need to have ways to reinforce the grid, rather than, oh, is it actually going to be an issue for the grid? And it's really easy to fall into those traps. Okay. So we just have to be mindful of that.
Let's take some more calls now as we ask you, as scientists have come out today to say July is on track to be the hottest month ever recorded. How has the increasing heat affected your life? Every summer we see this, right? So how has that affected you and your life? And how has your own behavior, your own perspective around climate change changed as a result of the increasing heat? Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And Dakota is calling us from Kamloops as well. Hi, Dakota. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. Thanks so much for calling. Has your own life, have you been personally affected by the heat in the interior?
Well, currently I'm the youth representative for Two Rivers Métis Society in Kamloops. We recently just got a grant to get a whole bunch of air conditionings out to people here in Kamloops. But one issue that I think that we're going to be seeing quite soon here is that we're going to be seeing an increase in energy and that kind of thing with these air conditioners, and especially in hotter parts like here in Kamloops, where just in 2017 we had the worst air quality. In 2021, we had so many people coming here from the fires and that kind of thing.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think it's a distribution issue, really, is that we aren't sharing this load of the climate emergency, and this heat is making people need to be displaced more. And I think even when it comes down to it, we all need to put, we all need to put ourselves behind before the greater of our society. And I think that also comes down to who we vote for and the governments that we put into place. Like we need to be having better public transit, better transit between cities, and making sure that we can get people out of those evacuation zones, but also making sure that we can reduce our emissions with these single occupancy vehicles. I mean, even when it comes down to like electric vehicles, there's still a lot of water and energy put into getting these rare earth metals from different parts of the world all together and assembled just so that we can have a car that like one person's driving.
So you're calling for more investment in public transit then?
Yeah.
Okay. And, that's a really interesting point you make, the kind of unequal distribution of the impacts, right? I'm sitting here in downtown Vancouver. It's a cool day. And we had quite a bit of rain the other day. And of course, we've had some very hot days as well, as Darius will attest to over the last couple of weeks. But when you think about just how much more communities in the north and the central interior have been affected, Darius, I mean, that's kind of your point, isn't it?
Yeah, no, totally gets to it. And I mean, even when it comes down to it, right, like you have floods that will happen because of this, right? You'll have all the snow that melts and then it'll come wash out entire cities. And Marin not too long ago got flooded. And I think that is also an impact. We are not just seeing fires and we're not just seeing heat. We're seeing the effects of that prolonged heat and how that affects later into the season.
Dakota, thank you so much for joining us and calling in from the Two Rivers Métis Society. Really good to hear from you.
Thank you so much.
You take care. Pete is joining us now from here in Vancouver. Hi, Pete. Welcome back.
Hi. Global boiling is infinitely better framing than global warming, and I wish they would have used that on day one to sort of counter the far-right fossil fuel disinformation industrial complex. And I'd like to thank Fraser Health Medical Officer Dr. Emily Newhouse. She fact-checked landlord disinformation on portable air conditioning on the early edition with Stephen Quinn on July 21st, right?
What did she say? What was her point?
Well, the landlords claim that it's going to, like you're one of the people on your panel talking about, it's going to collapse the grid.
This was the story around air conditioners in apartments. Okay.
Yeah, so she basically asked their engineers, hey, is this true? And what they found out is that modern efficient window units for air conditioning only use 4.5 amps, same as a tea kettle or a toaster oven. And it's definitely less than a portable space heater. So I hope more people sort of get this information out, because we deserve not to boil to death in our apartments because someone doesn't want to, the look of an air conditioner pipe sort of, just popping through the window.
Yourself, Pete, it takes me back absolutely to 2021. Of course, the deaths as a result of the heat dome. For yourself personally, how have you been affected?
I am one of the fortunate ones because I have a portable air conditioner. But this brings a larger question of inequality. Do you get to live or die depending on how much money do you have? Do you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have a lot of trees? Are you allowed to have portable air conditioning? Do you have a government that allows landlords to ban it, like the BC Conservative Party, the BC NDP, the former, left-wing party that now is a corporatist one. It's a real big issue, I would argue.
Let me just get the facts out there on that then. Pete, thank you so much. That point about inequality, you take care. Where you live, do you have access to air conditioning? And the BC government has just introduced a program to provide some air conditioners as well to some communities. From Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health, I did hear that interview with Dr. Emily Newhouse as well, but this is from Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health as a result of CBC's reporting into air conditioners and apartments and requests to install them. This statement from Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health. Public Health at Vancouver Coastal Health and Fraser Health have issued new guidance for landlords and managers of rental housing and residential strata corporations providing strata housing in the Lower Mainland. The guidance is to encourage the removal of barriers that prevent residents from staying cool during heat events. So this would be under health authorities, and these two have issued this new guidance saying that they encourage the removal of barriers that prevent residents from staying cool during heat events. Thank you so much, Pete. CBC radio listener there from Vancouver. Let me go back to my guests, Michael Mehta, Environmental Studies Professor at Thompson Rivers University, and Darius Madavi, our Climate and Science Specialist here at CBC in Vancouver. I'm learning so much about how people are reacting to this news, right? They're not surprised. They would like to see solutions, and they're really talking as well about information, whether it's misinformation or lack of information. Let me go to you first, Michael Mehta. What do you want people to take from this? You said earlier, the reaction might be paralysis, or it might be being proactive. What do you want people to take from this news? Because you're right. Sometimes people might just hear it and just say it's yet more bad news. What do I do with that?
Right, and because this has sort of been an issue that's been building over the decades, people sort of get used to it, right? I think what we have to do is we have to start asking fundamental questions like, for people who work outdoors, for instance, do we need to shift the workday so that they start at 6 in the morning in summer months instead of the 9 to 5 to minimize exposures to heat and to air pollution? I mean, those are the kinds of questions that are not necessarily policy questions or subsidization of technology like air conditioning. They are more fundamental types of questions about how we live.
Really interesting, that adaptation as well. And Darius, so your job is to communicate this today. What is the headline you would like people to leave with?
I think there are two big points that were just brought up that are really important. The first is air conditioning. Now, air conditioners, portable air conditioners, like the newer models, do use a lot less energy than they used to.
Okay.
A lot of people do have the existing units that do use a lot of energy. They often contain hydrofluorocarbons, which are a massive contributor to the greenhouse effect. They're thousands of times more potent than carbon dioxide. And so that's a lot of the discourse around air conditioning is around these issues because they do contribute to the problem they're trying to solve. But I also think it's really important to realize that they are necessary in a time when we're having these heat waves, that people can't survive at those temperatures that they're experiencing. They are a necessary a part of an adaptation strategy. Now, as we green the grid, as we remove a lot of the carbon dioxide emissions from our electricity generation, and as we remove HFCs from air conditioners, they'll become a lot more green. So this is there need to be a short-term solution. I know that the caller, Pete, he brought up having green spaces in cities. This is part of what we need to be doing. We need larger scale solutions. Air conditioners only cool the inside. A lot of our most vulnerable people don't have access to indoor spaces that have air conditioning. Having green cities, green roofs, trees along streets, those can lower the temperature of cities by as much as 5 degrees Celsius. That's a huge thing that we need to be focusing on to keep people safe.
Did I ever feel that yesterday or a few days ago walking, and it was very hot. The sun was bearing down on me. I went under a tree and the temperature's much cooler.
Exactly.
Really good to hear from you both. Thank you so much. And goodbye to Kendra as well. Kendra the parrot. Good to speak with you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you, Darius.
Thank you.
Michael Mehta, an environmental studies professor at Thompson Rivers University, and Darius Madavi is our climate and science specialist here at CBC. Jenna writes us, I think we need Manhattan Project level dedication to research on real and actual solutions of sources of alternative energy and systems. I'd recommend everyone learn about the Manhattan Project, and conveniently they can watch Oppenheimer in theaters. Well, thank you very much for that, Jenna. It is now 12:33, 1:33 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us here on radio and live streaming as well. CBC Vancouver on YouTube and CBC Gem, cbc.ca/BC. Coming up in our next half hour, we're going to talk about something that is apparently happening more and more often now, whether it's due to finances, the housing crisis, or family preferences. It seems more adult children are still living with their parents. So we are asking you, are you a young adult living at home with your parents? Or if you're a parent, have you had an adult child move back home? We want to hear from you, your experience, and do you think that there is still too much judgment out there of this situation? Love to hear from you. We have someone who is studying this phenomenon right now to take your calls. That's all coming up after the CBC News Update with Zara Premji.
Good afternoon. BC Wildfire Service is reporting 412 active wildfires, down by about 70 since Monday. 21 highly visible or potentially threatening fires are listed on the Wildfire Service website, while the site shows 8 new blazes have been recorded in the last 24 hours. And BC Ferries is hoping to have the Coastal Celebration ferry back in service tomorrow. It has been in and out of operation after returning from a refit earlier this month. The Coastal Celebration is one of the largest vessels in the ferry fleet and usually plies the water between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay. There have been serious delays on that route during its absence from service. And the city of Kelowna is changing its strategy on how it deals with homelessness. Earlier this week, it announced it's now not renewing its agreement with Central Okanagan Journey Home Society, instead creating a new team to look at homelessness in the city, which will be the third since 1999. Now, the BC weather for the North Coast, a mix of sun and cloud, highs of 19. For the Peace region, showers today with a chance of lightning and a high of 18. 18. For the central interior, there should be some late afternoon thunder activity, hopefully not. Highs to 19. For the Boundary and Kootenay regions, a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 30. For the Okanagan and southern interior, a chance of lightning in the afternoon, highs near 29. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, clear skies, temperature sitting between 22 and 25. Back to you, Michelle Eliot with BC Today.
Well, thank you, Zara Premji. Are we on full name basis now?
Yeah, I felt like being really formal with you. It was just feeling. No, I'm just kidding.
No, of course, we are friends, and we have gone for dinner and spin class.
Oh, spin class best.
Yes, of course. Let's be formal and official this afternoon. Zara Premji, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll talk to you later. That's Zara Premji in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. We are on radio in Metro Vancouver. You can listen to us, cbc.ca/BC, 88.1 FM on your dial. And you can use the CBC Listen app too. If you are watching us, welcome to you. Nice to have you with us. And you are watching us on YouTube. CBC Vancouver is where you can find us. You can find us online too, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Gem app. So many ways that you can tune in. Really good to have you with us. Well, think back to when you were 18 years old. Did you pack your bags, bid your parents goodbye, and move on out to your own dorm room or apartment? Yeah, for so many years, that was the norm. But it does appear that that expectation is changing. Census data shows an increase over the decades of people between 20 and 34 living at home with at least one parent. And the reasons could be housing, schooling, or family expectations. We're going to speak with someone who studies this phenomenon and how families and our society are dealing with it. We're also asking you, is this your situation? Are you a young adult living at home with your parents? Or if you're a parent, have you had an adult child move back home or still live at home with you? And do you think our society is still too judgmental about this? We'd love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, it's star or pound 690. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. We'd love to hear your stories this half hour. My guest is Umay Kadar. She's a PhD candidate who studies families and social policy, and she is currently studying this phenomenon. Umay, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Michelle.
Nice to have you with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Do we know how much more common it is now for young adults to be living with their parents?
Yes, we do actually in Canada. Based on 2021 census, we know that young adults who are aged from 20 to 34, 35.1% of this age group live together with their parents now. And if we look at the older age bracket from 25 to 34, we see even higher numbers, which is 46%.
Oh, really?
Canada-wide. So it is like almost 1 in every 2 young adults who are aged between 25 to 34 were living together with their parents based on 2021 census. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that's a good chunk. And why did you want to take a look at this?
Well, when I first started doing my PhD in Vancouver at UBC, I realized I came across newsletter basically with headlines saying, "Oh, why are those millennials still living at home? When are they going to move
And
out?"
often said with a side of judgment, right?
Side of judgment, with parents having this judgmental look on their face towards their adult kids, and that took my attention because I come from Turkey, and it is not necessarily a thing here in my culture. So I was wondering, well, why is this something to talk about here? And I thought, well, do we also know necessarily what is going on inside those households, right? We might know some of the structural reasons, as you also listed some of them, like housing market, student debt, prolonged higher education. But I figured we don't necessarily know the insider information, like the household dynamics and interpersonal relationships in this case. Yes, so
Yeah.
that sparked my attention
Of
back at the time.
living in close quarters with your parents or your adult child. We're going to get into that a little bit more as well. And you have some very interesting perspectives on what impact this can have on the children and the parents too. I'd love to hear from our listeners as well. Are you a young adult living with your parents at home? Or if you're a parent, have you had an adult child move back in? And do you think that there is still that judgment out there? How does our society deal with this, do you think? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 on your cell phone, star or pound 690. Brian is joining us from Kamloops. Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hi.
Yes. What's your experience?
Well, actually, like when I was first coming out of school in the 80s, I ended up living back at home a little bit till I got settled again. And right now, my 22-year-old daughter is living at home. But the difference now between then is, like, you cannot afford a house now, right? Like, I bought my first house for $100,000, and I was making like $50,000 or $60,000 a year at the time.
Yeah.
Now, to buy an equivalent house, you'd have to be making well over $200,000 a year to buy a house. So it's just become totally unaffordable for this whole generation to set up. And the barn doors are, we're trying to close the barn door, but fundamentally what's happened over the years is houses have become an investment there. So we've separated, sustainable living from an actual investment. Now, there is some ideas out there about, issuing development permits to places where, yes, you can build this house for this and we'll give you discounts, but down the road, you can only increase the price every, 5% every 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Like you can control the increase in price and otherwise you get taxed really high, right? Like fundamentally, that's what's happened. And it's not like we talk about foreign ownership and such as part of it, but frankly, it's all Canadians. Ultimately, right?
The investment, that is what the stats show. And Brian, I mean, you did a great job there of comparing your own experience with your daughters. What's it like then for your family?
Well, we love each other, so
you get along just fine.
So you always get along, but there's always living in close quarters. There's always sometimes issues. So how it works.
How do you navigate them?
Talking, right? Like we've done that a lot, right?
Yeah. So, that's great. And so for your own daughter, it sounds like it is housing, right? That's the issue behind it. What are your thoughts about, what might happen in the future?
Ultimately, we'll probably support her getting a house, right? I had another friend, he helped both of his kids buy fixer-up houses.
Yeah.
And then, as he retired, he spent his whole time fixing up their houses. So he now has set them up for life, right? So once you get into that first house and now you have equity, then it doesn't work too bad there. But it's just, we've set up a whole generation here that can't get into that equity market and fundamental living. So we have to think of something different. So.
That's how you're adapting. Brian, thank you so much. And your daughter is lucky to have you.
Okay, great.
Take care. Bye-bye. That's Brian joining us from Kamloops. His 22-year-old daughter lives at home. Love to hear from you. Do you have an adult child living at home? Are you a young adult between 20 and 34 who has either moved back home with your parents or still living at home with your parents? We'd love to hear your experience. What are the reasons behind it? And how do you navigate those issues that can come up? 1-800-825-5950. 604-669-3733 on your cell phone, star or pound 690. Our next caller is Patrick, joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, how's it going?
I am just fine. Thanks for calling in. What did you want to say?
I was just wondering, maybe it's more of like just a topic of discussion, but like the cultural differences between our society and other cultures where some cultures it's almost expected that your child lives at home until they get married, or almost indefinitely to take care of the parents. Like that stigma between our culture and other cultures.
That's really interesting. I mean, that's the case for me. I moved here from the Philippines when I was 12 years old, and I quickly learned that the norm here was that you would move out at 18. But for my parents, they were so used to everybody living together indefinitely, and so that's certainly something that I've experienced myself. What about for you? What's your own experience, Patrick?
Well, I would love the opportunity to live with my parents. Unfortunately, that'll never happen at this stage in their lives. My dad passed away, and fortunately or unfortunately enough, he left me a little bit of money to put a down payment on a house. But now my mom lives in a small one-bedroom, so the opportunity for me, to live at home and save money till I close or till my place is completed construction is not an option. But I would have no problem with it.
Yeah.
I'd love to save the money. But
Right.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting dynamic between the two cultures.
Yeah, that is such an interesting point that you raised, Patrick. Thank you so much. Lovely to hear from you today.
Thanks for taking my call.
That's Patrick in Vancouver. Let me go back to my guest, Umay Khadar, who is a PhD candidate studying this very issue. Wow, you've come across this, the cultural differences, different approaches to the experience of moving out. What have you found?
Well, I have so far I have diverse array of participants from East European, Southeast Asian, and East Asian cultures. And I can say it is very common across these different cultural backgrounds. And common patterns show that some of the experiences are very similar across different cultures in terms of my participants' experiences. So I can say it is more like it is important to consider, yes, there are structural considerations, structural constraints, and cultural expectations and parental expectations. But at the same time, my research at least has so far revealed that it is important to take into consideration that young adults themselves have their own agencies and decision-making capacities, so that
And it's their choice, yeah.
That is, yeah. There's a lot of choice involved in this decision.
What have you found has been the impact then? How are people, whether it's something that they would like to do, have chosen to do, or it's a result of those financial constraints? What is the impact on the child, the young adult, and the parents as well of this situation?
Well, my research is still ongoing, but so far I can say, and as we say in sociology, family relationships are so complex.
Yes.
And household dynamics are very contextual and relational. So I can say my participants also have experienced a lot of different experiences and reasons and motivations, behind choices. It is so hard to say it is out of pure, necessity or out of pure choice, because life doesn't work like that.
Right.
But we can definitely say that they are all very much concerned about their household, matters, whether it is finances or their parents' well-being and health, and if their parents have chronic health conditions, or if they think that their parents don't have enough social and emotional support mechanisms when they, when their adult kids move out. And so my participants were very much concerned about their parents' future well-being.
Okay. And what about, we heard from Brian about some issues come up and you talk them through. What are some of those issues?
Yeah, some of these issues I have come across so far are sometimes my participants have felt whenever they try to initiate their own, agencies or adult decisions at home, they felt like their parents were still treating them like children, and they were having a hard time in navigating that. and also they were very, very respectful, of their parents' place and like rules and expectations. They were navigating this situation in a very careful way, as one of my participants put in their words, as a delicate dance.
You're using air quotes.
Yes, I am using quote and unquote because that is a word from my participant. And there's a phrase used by my participant. Yes. So, and they are feeling like they are whether they are being a bad adult by moving out and leaving their parents alone, or whether they are being or by not leaving and staying at home.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's a huge conflict, and
Yeah.
yes, like conflict of expectations. And,
I can imagine a lot of that internal conflict around that and how you perceive yourself. Really interesting work that's being done by Umay Kadar, a PhD candidate at UBC's School of Sociology. We are asking you if this is a situation you're in, if you are an a young adult rather, living at home with your parents, or if you're a parent whose adult child has moved back home or is living at home. We are taking your experiences at 1-800-825 5950 604-669-3733. Terry is up next now in Victoria. Hi, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's your experience?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, my experience is just a little bit different. I've found myself in my later half of my life living on my own and not being able to afford things. My son also can't afford the rent in the area, so we've got two people that need help. So
right.
We're together.
Yeah. I can't imagine that's uncommon. I think that's probably a very common scenario.
I think it is, and it just hadn't been brought up, so I wanted to bring it up. And,
Fantastic.
It's usually then you're in small spaces, small places, so you're living on top of each other, and so it becomes a bit of a challenge too, right?
Yes. What's that like for you then?
It's a bit of a challenge.
Careful, I think, is what Umay said. Any tips you want to share then? What have you learned about trying to navigate that?
I guess it's just communication. I think that has been brought up before too. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for raising that, Terry. It is a really good point that it's not just this generation that's affected by the housing crisis, the younger generation. And I'm glad at least that you're able to solve that through living together. Thank you so much for bringing that point across.
Thanks.
That's Terry in Victoria. Enrique is joining us now from Surrey. Hi, Enrique.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing just fine. Thanks so much for calling.
Oh, okay. I have two kids. They're 30. The older one is 32, and my younger is 23. They're all boys, and they all live with us. I love having them in the house, and I don't think I can take it if they leave the house. we are doing very well. They eventually will be leaving the house, and I want to do my best to do what I can as a parent, because once they leave the house, I won't be able to do that anymore for them. I cannot cook for them. I cannot do their laundry. I cannot.
My heart.
It will break my heart once they leave the house. I just love them. I love my kids. Yeah.
You must be so close with your children.
We are. We both are. They're both boys, and yeah. I know one of these days they will be leaving the house because they will be getting married. Maybe the younger one won't be marrying pretty soon, but I don't know.
You have, I can hear the love in your voice, Enrique. Anything you want to share with other people if they end up in this scenario or choose to do so as you have? What's your biggest piece of advice?
Well, just love your kids. Enjoy them while they're in your house. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Enrique, lucky kids, eh? Well, they're adults now, but 23 and 32. But what a wonderful family you have. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
That's Enrique joining us from Surrey. Well, that's a very heartwarming call, Umay. What do you want people to take from our conversation? What are you hoping to learn from the study that you're currently conducting?
Well, yes, that was really a heartwarming conversation.
Yeah.
And if their adult children who live at home want to have an interview with me, they are more than welcome to reach out because I'm still going to recruit my participants and hopefully continue my interviews in September. But my takeaway from all this is, as a scholar of sociology who study gender and family, I really think that age and milestones are socially and culturally constructed. And everyone has their own life journeys and their own timelines. As one of your participants right now in this show indicated, it is a huge generational difference that in a context that we are living right now. So with this huge contextual economic and all these social differences, it is very unrealistic to expect the exact same conditions to happen, like exact same milestones to be happening at the expected time and expected place. So
yeah, what a great point.
I suggest like family relationships are very complex, and every family, every young adult, every one of their parents have their own reasons and motivations to live together. Yes, there are conflict, but many of my participants also indicated that they were, and their parents were also very happy having them at home. It was actually giving them a lot of joy by especially they were cooking together, eating together. It all depends on the relationships, right? We can't really judge this is what is happening, so this is acceptable versus this is unacceptable. It is so hard to
make a broad sweeping judgment.
Absolutely.
What a great point. That is a wonderful point I think people can take away. Let's just read some emails here. Lots of stories coming in. Anna writes, I have a 26-year-old and a 22-year-old still living at home. Recently, my other 22-year-old moved out on her own. They're all uni students. There is no way anyone can go to uni and pay rent unless they start getting loans. And so we've always told them they can live at home for free while they are a student. And Helen writes, the joke in our family is that I got remarried and moved out. My 23-year-old son still lives in my Vancouver apartment with heavily subsidized rent. Seriously, housing is so expensive. Something has to snap soon. So housing, an issue there. Umay, we can't wait to see the result of your study. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And
take care.
Take care. Bye. Thank you.
Umay Kadar is a PhD candidate at UBC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks so much for joining us on BC Today.